You can't have video games without clones, and these things are everywhere. Mostly because when a good idea pops up on the scene, it becomes the new standard. This has been happening as far back as gaming goes, and still today. A lot of the time, these are just derivative inspirations, but other times it crosses into straight up clone or rip-off territory. I imagine it's hard to look at something like Palworld and think about anything that isn't a combination of the words pocket and or monster, and well, it looks like Nintendo thinks so too. We're not new around these parts. We've been covering clones for 10 years now, and considering they haven't stopped coming out, there's always gonna be something. Even if that something is as egregious of a ripoff as they come, like Stumble Guys to Fall Guys. Maybe not bad, but I mean, look at the freaking thing. You can find all sorts of these borderline ripoffs on Google Play and the App Store, but only Fall Guys will get itself a Final Fantasy XIV collab. Stumboy's gotta settle for the Smurfs.
Wanna play Smurfball? No thanks.
So once again, this one goes out to the inspirations, clones, and ripoffs from games not quite big enough for their own video. Although at this point, there might be enough Gears of War clones for that to be its own thing. Seriously, everyone was making these on the 360 and PlayStation 3. Not even Harry Potter was safe.
Something's wrong with this thing. It keeps jamming. See?
So yo, it's Austin, and today we're gonna be talking about more clones and ripoffs that you probably haven't played, with a little asterisk because there's always someone, but hey, YouTube dictates that I fudge the truth a little bit so I can feed my dumb cats. Speaking of, before we get started, I've got a word from today's sponsor, and a good one, Rocket Money. Because sometimes you just forget. I'm sure that this happens to a lot of us. You subscribe to some kind of service, be it like a digital streaming service, something with food, or a free trial that you totally forgot about. That's money being spent on something that you could be saving towards something that you really need, like a brand new car, or just creating some savings. Well, today's sponsor, Rocket Money, will help you do just that. Rocket Money is the personal finance app that helps you cancel subscriptions, lower bills, and manage your money better. I'm personally using Rocket Money to cancel unwanted subscriptions. Sometimes I need access to a streaming platform or a digital game library, but just for a little bit of time. And with Rocket Money, I can cancel a ton of these charges from the app with a press of just a couple of buttons. Which also means you don't gotta worry about calling and talking to somebody just because the cancel subscription button is mysteriously missing from their site. I've also been using it to set better budgets for myself because hey, it's hard out there, and Rocket Money will actually actively monitor your spending, and you can set limits to help you make better decisions. Rocket Money has helped save its customers up to $740 a year when they use all the features, and that's $500 million in canceled subscriptions. So if you want to save more and spend less, join the over 5 million people using Rocket Money today by clicking the link down in the description. Go to rocketmoney.com/eruption or click that link to get started for free. You can also unlock more features with premium. That's rocketmoney.com/eruption to get started for free. Thanks to Rocket Money for the sponsor, but for now, we need to get back to the games, the clones, the derivative things. Let's not spend any more time. I want to get this thing rolling with retro releases, because back then it was less, oh, your game is inspired by mine, and more so, oh wow, this is exactly mine, with different pixels. I always forget about just how many games were aped straight out of Castlevania. Konami's Castlevania sure was a big deal. Simon's quest to defeat Dracula was such a standout back in the day that it evolved into a huge franchise with tons of sequels, most pretty good actually. The series is divided on its gameplay though, as there was a drastic change in how things worked, with Symphony of the Night turning into the Metroidvanias that we see today. But before that, Castlevania was tough 2D platforming with a mix of whipping, axe throwing, or whatever item you can get your hand on. All that mattered was that Dracula needed to die, and this would continue for several decades. Those original NES releases were big hits, minus whatever the second one was doing, and surely it was gonna attract imitators. There's actually a ton of these, but first up to bat today is a little IREM, well, it's not a classic, but it is a game called Holy Diver. Yeah, no, not officially Dio. However, Holy Diver was based on that album by Dio, considering all the characters are named after 80s metal musicians. Meaning we're playing as a dude named Randy, inspired by the guitarist Randy Rhoads. All of this is wild, considering it didn't actually release in the States. This was a Japanese Famicom exclusive. Randy here is a freaking mage. He's got spells and needs to go through stages while blasting dudes away and utilizing magic. This game kind of falls somewhere between Mega Man and Castlevania, as you unlock new spells spells for beating bosses, some of which are used for platforming as well. Holy Diver is pretty cool actually, just also incredibly hard. Like maybe too hard. Holy Diver actually caught flack for its difficulty back when it was released in 1989, which also led to some notably poor review scores. Only 822 out of 40 from Famitsu, which is pretty low. But also, when I walk into rooms like this, where there's simply no escape, I kind of understand. At the very least, we got, from the looks of it, unlimited continues. It'd be impossible without. Holy Diver is TLDL, that L for listen, since you ain't reading nothing except work emails right now. Even harder mode Castlevania. I think it's pretty all right. Also, you can shoot straight up. That was like unheard of. Master of Darkness. How about another Castlevania clone, but this time of the Sega variety. Coming out on the Game Gear and Master System all the way in 1993, only 2 years before the PlayStation 1, which is crazy to think of. Master of Darkness is what it looks like. Developed by Sims, who made a lot of stuff for Sega, Mod has you controlling a dude that loves Ouija boards named Dr. Ferdinand Social. This guy wants to kill Dracula. So yeah, it's a Castlevania clone on that alone, but also it's tied into a lot of ancient Londonese lore like Jack the Ripper and the Thames River. You're hopping and slashing and even going up staircases in a very Belmontian fashion. Master of Darkness knows what it is, but has an interesting spin on things with the weapon system. You're not exclusively tied to whips. Mr. Social has the ability to use rapiers, daggers, and axes too. You gotta pick up primary weapons from drops as well as secondaries, though I gotta say, the dagger sucks. You gotta love when you got a nice loadout going into a boss fight and then an enemy Castlevania bumps you backwards into a power-up, making the fight impossible because they have a ridiculous amount of health and the dagger sucks. Master of Darkness is pretty forgiving in comparison to Castlevania, and it actually lets you go backwards during stage transitions, so if you get knocked off a ledge, there's a chance it'll just go back a screen. Obviously, the soundtrack isn't up to snuff with Konami's sound teams from the era, but for something on the Game Gear and Master System, I think they did a pretty good job. You gotta love how Sega went from the little to the Genesis thump that games like Sonic and Sparkster could put out. Master of Darkness, while a pretty obvious clone, is neat. No asterisk. I think it's cool. You could really tell Sega wanted in on some of that Nintendo magic back in the day. Prior to the Genesis, when the Master System was their big shtick, I think Sega eked out a few surprises like this, and also Golden Axe Warrior. Never heard of it? Well, I'll give you 2 seconds to guess what this is a clone of. Huh. Where have we seen this before? Golden Axe Warrior for the Sega Master System, also known as, damn, I wish we thought of that. Where's its inspirations without any shame? It also isn't afraid to tell you who the villain is. Death Adder attacked. Death Adder killed your parents. Destroy Death Adder. Yeah, okay, fine, I will. This one's kind of hard too. Golden Axe Warrior is very 2D Zelda-like in nature. You run around exploring this massive world, and it's almost note for note, beat for beat. The scrolling, the hidden areas, the way enemies spawn in with a poof. It is very much a Zelda clone, and it wears it on its sleeves, no shame. In fact, Golden Axe Warrior is barely Golden Axe. Basically just a name minus a few character designs and the fact that old Gilius Thunderhead, one of my favorite kart racing characters, is sitting by himself in a cabin wanting some golden apples. There's this village that was destroyed by the Death Adder in the overworld that's supposed to have some, so let's check it out. Could only afford a single house theme, huh? A nice little jaunt over a ton of death, destruction, decaying bodies. Oh look, the golden apple. I will give you life. Yo, did this dude just give me his heart and die? Golden Axe Warrior is a pretty decent Zelda clone with a few Master System quirks that I had a decent time with. If you play it as a standalone thing, totally outside other games' influence, it's really enjoyable, but if you swing it alongside Zelda 1 or the early East titles, it's not so good. I mean, look, I'm just saying, if I beat a dungeon, you shouldn't require me to manually walk out, especially not after forcing me to listen to this noise. dropping Twinbee Rainbow Bell Adventures, a Japanese and European exclusive because f*** America, I guess. This little dude's been all over the place. Maybe you know Twinbee, the vertical cute 'em up shmup icon. I love him. You know what else I love? Rocket Knight Adventures. Yeah, talked about Sparkster to set it up. Well, what happens when the developers of both, Konami, decide to smash those ideas together? You get Rainbow Bell Adventures, an action platformer with the same bouncy rocket action as one of the greatest games of all time. This game is cute, and also something I'm shocked didn't come stateside. As far as platformers go, it's not too challenging. You pick from 3 characters who are all something B, one of them being Twinbee, which just made me think of Smiling Friends. And each of them navigate these stages jumping, punching, and rocketeering around the walls. Seriously, when you blast off with that rocket boost, you start moving. It doesn't have the speed and intensity of Sparkster or Rocket Knight Adventure, although Twinbee does have a gun.
I started blasting. Bang!
Maybe it's not fair to call Twinbee here a clone, considering Konami made both of them, but you can absolutely see the inspiration all over the screen. Rainbow Bell Adventures is pretty good, minus the infinitely scrolling stages that are easy to get lost in. Look, if you at any point remind me of Rocket Knight Adventures, you're probably doing okay, unless you're Rocket Knight. Considering Twinbee never made it to the States, it's definitely more on the obscure side of things, which are some of my favorite games to talk about. There's always gonna be your big franchises getting clones and imitations, but sometimes your smaller franchises get a copy as well. For example, Metal Slug.
Rocket launcher.
SNK's Metal Slug is awesome. It's one of the most definitive quarter-devouring arcade titles of all time. It was a staple of just about every American arcade I went to growing up. There's a ton of games in the series, they've been ported all over the place. People know Metal Slug is pretty good. Minus Metal Slug 3D, I don't know about that one. Like the 2D's half the appeal. This series has such a unique feel to the running and gunning, and even the sound effects that I was shocked the first time I tried Dolphin Blue. Never heard of it? Well, that's because it never technically made its way over to the States. Dolphin Blue is a Sammy published and developed romp shortly before they fused with Sega, and it is, well, I mean, look at the thing. I thought the machine gun was the same sound too. It's pretty dang close. The aiming while firing is pretty similar too. I'm tempted to call this one a clone straight up, but also it's got the kicker. Dolphins. Hence the dolphin in Dolphin Blue. These dudes are killers. They're apparently trained to work alongside the future royal army to take down the evil empire. Literally just called the evil empire. At least they're honest. Imagine Waterworld, but anime, and that's Dolphin Blue. You've got the same formula of going through stages, collecting power-ups with ammo, blasting through endless waves of baddies with wacky, fun animations, and of course, dying. Lots of dying. Like, okay, wow, this actually might be harder than Old Sluggers. How is anyone supposed to dodge that one? There's a lot to love about Dolphin Blue. It's bright, the environments and characters are vivid, it feels good. I love the little meter on the bottom that charges up for the specials. It's also essentially the iframe dodging dolphin destruction button. That won't help you too much in the last few stages though, when it's, well, just look at the screen. This isn't for humans. Dolphin Blue is a fantastic Metal Slug clone, which is already a fantastic series, so there wasn't much of a chance that it'd suck. Shoutouts to the hackers who took the Atomus Wave arcade ports and made it natively playable on the Dreamcast, so anyone can try this out. And if you like classic arcade games, it's worth it, which is a lot more than you can say for Street Racing Syndicate. You know what rules? Need for Speed Underground. I talked about its sequel in a recent video, and yeah, it's still good. I didn't realize this back then, but of course, with its insane success would come some imitators. I just didn't realize it'd be something made by Technics, the people behind everyone's favorite Pimp My Ride. All these two.
The cops popped Eddie last night for street racing. Man, if we don't run, I'm out 3 G's.
Yo, what is that? This looks like the South Park anime episode. Living it up in the underground import car racing scene, which was briefly popular in the 2000s, Street Race Syndicate is all that you see here. It's mostly nighttime street racing with customizable cars, but it actually hit the market before Underground 2, meaning it was the first with an open world to explore. It's just a shame that in comparison, it feels dreadful. Published by Namco, which was something I didn't see coming, SRS, no not on Fightful Select, select is a street racer with 3 goals. Win money, get respect, gain girlfriends. A grand total of 18 for some reason, and who the hell has time for all that? You'll get money to spend on vehicle upgrades, which aren't as fancy as the Underground series, discover new tracks, make bets against other racers, and up the ante in order to get your name out there, all while watching FMVs of women dancing. Well, you can see what this one's about, doubly so since the cars left some focus on the cover. Street Racing Syndicate isn't terrible, but it's definitely trying to lean into a market that is well covered by much better games. But hey, they're not currently purchasable, and Street Racing Syndicate is on Steam for $2.99, so who's laughing now? That'd be Funbox Media Limited, actually. I guess Namco let it slip.
Come back when you know how to handle that thing, yeah?
Can you imagine hitting up the Bandai Namco TGS booth and seeing a remake of this? Speaking of, Tomb Raider. Did you know Tomb Raider has a few clones? And no, I'm not talking about Dude Raider or some of the literal ripoffs like Ancient Lost City Relic Hunter. Yeah, I know what you are. I'm talking about Space Bunnies Must Die. If you haven't seen this one, I understand. It apparently only sold 2,458 copies in its debut year, which is incredibly unfortunate, but the quality kind of reflects that.
Roadkill.
Yeah, okay. Space Bunnies Must Die is a Tomb Raider clone. If you know what that means, you'd better get ready for tank controls to show up in the impact zone. There's no tombs to raid though, instead you're playing as Allison Huckster, a truck stop waitress and rodeo performer who is very observant.
Chicken.
It's either that, long tutorials, or terrible one-liners.
Man, this is just like an X-Files.
It's like your parent calling your Sega Genesis one of the Nintendos.
Idiot.
I actually like the concept of Space Bunnies Must Die. You're basically caught up in the middle of an alien invasion, done by space bunnies, of course, trying to save your sister who gets abducted in the intro cutscenes. Then you go level to level doing the Tomb Raider variety of gameplay trying to save her. And I do mean that variety. You need to line those jumps up and hold action buttons in order to make it work, especially because this game's got some deaths. Yeah, this is only T-rated. Bit heavy for that, don't you think? You can tell they knew they gave this game some bullshit difficulty sequences by the insane frequency of checkpoints. Seriously, I'll save, move 40 seconds, and then there's another save point. Other times it goes for a while, but I don't think they cared too much about that. I think the audience for Jinx and Ripcord Games' Space Bunnies here is the people who loved that Duke Nukem and Tomb Raider Next Gen magazine cover. You can hold down a button to start dancing to some music, even during important, world-changing, thought-provoking bits of lore.
That must be the son of a bitch who's got my sister.
Don't forget to pick up the alternate outfits. Space Bunnies Must Die. I actually don't think this is terrible, but it certainly isn't good either. You have to manage a decently sized inventory on the tiny bottom bit of the screen, and you'll end up stockpiling zombie juice to heal yourself with. But it's all done in such a clunky and slow manner. In fact, every bit of movement and platforming feels like you're going in slow motion. When you make the original Tomb Raider feel fast by comparison, you know you got a problem. Seriously, it takes so long to line up all these jumps and for hanging animations to play out. They even glitch out and can freeze mid-swing. Space Bunny here's got a lot of jank, and not in the fun way. I ended up having a lot of issues running this on Windows 11 due to the fact that it's an ancient PC game from the 90s, but I got decently far, or so I thought. There's a bunch of levels here, most of which look the same with no interesting cutscenes or world building. It's relying purely on its hackneyed sci-fi horror concept, and it looks like there's no real anything but the slow gameplay for the entire experience. Just a single cutscene to start and end with, then let's go home and allegedly pitch a TV show to Fox and Comedy Central. I'm guessing that one didn't go too far. I think there's a fun game buried inside Space Bunnies Must Die, but it doesn't have much personality. The levels are bland, and the jank is too strong with this one. Allison, what are your thoughts on this?
This is starting to get scary.
So those are a bit more obscure. How about something that's a little more blatant? Something Teach would look at and straight up accuse you of copying someone's homework. Video game clones are already on the blatant spectrum, but something like Countdown Vampires is doubly so.
Are you all right?
I'm so... help me.
This is Countdown Vampires, the 2-disc bona fide Kusoge classic by Bandai and K2 LLC, who you might recognize as the developers of a majority of the Tenchu series, the not so good ones. Well, Countdown Vampires was their first release, and I've never gone through so many emotions while playing a game. This is obviously a Resident Evil clone through and through. The pre-rendered backgrounds, the camera angles, the survival horror aspects, heck, even the controls are all doing their best to mimic something real good. It just kind of fails in most of those. You take control of Rim City Detective Keith J. Snyder, who makes sure to let you know right away.
I'm a homicide detective. What do you mean? What are you talking about? What are they? They're vampires!
You telling me that this super badass looking homicide detective, fully tribal tattooed up, guns ready to go, hair slicked back, and refusing to wear a t-shirt like Randy from Trailer Park Boys, sounds like this goofy, timid dude? Nah, I don't buy it. This is Countdown Vampires, and we're here for one reason. Vampires?
They're vampires!
This game was universally shat on when it came out, 3s, 4s across the board, and I can understand why. When people like myself argue against tank controls, Vamps here is why. The turn radius is so slow, and you'll often find yourself engaged against several enemies at the same time. The kicker here is that you've got different ways to deal with them. Considering the whole vampires part of the name, you've got the option to try and cure them with your white water. It's basically holy water. For this, you gotta knock them out with your stun fists or Trank Dart Gun, which only takes a quick, 10 shots. It's exciting gameplay, huh? Then you gotta give them a little sauce. I don't know about that sound. The amount of vampires you can save from their countdowns or whatever will also kind of determine what ending you get. So all things considered, when you enter a room with 4 dudes charging at you, I guess a little blasty shotty action's the best we can do. I just realized I'm making this sound really exciting. When a majority of my gameplay is actually just plodding between rooms, collecting key cards with the names of various strippers on it, and to open doors that all look exactly the same, being totally confused on where to go, getting lost, and just not having a good time, though a vast majority of this experience is soulless, filled with what I can only describe as fart music. Then I'm suddenly tossed into this situation and I lose my mind.
The countdown is beginning.
Countdown? What are you talking about?
I don't like Countdown Vampires at all, but I sure enjoyed playing this with some friends. There's better and worse Resident Evil clones, but where else am I gonna get cool CG cats and stair climbing animations like this?
Misato, I told you to wait.
Now, a complete tonal shift. Anyone ever see that Chronicles of Narnia movie? The first one, Lion the Witch in the Wardrobe. It is what you probably expect from a mid-2000s kid-friendly fantasy flick. Safe, whimsical, maybe a bit too much CGI. What do you mean? Aslan's not real? But with its popularity and the way licensed marketing trains go, we'd be getting a video game. You just might not expect it to be a Lego clone. What does that even mean? Well, take a look. It doesn't help that this was also developed by the same people who made Lego Star Wars Traveler's Tales in the same year that came out. Is this really a clone? Kind of. It's definitely the developer doing the exact same thing with a totally different franchise. So yeah, I guess sometimes you gotta clone yourself. Final results, it's pretty good actually. Chronicles of Narnia plays exactly how you'd expect. You pick levels, mash people around, do puzzles, Lost Vikings your way through situations, and you can do it in co-op. And I sure hope you do because the AI is entirely brain dead. See, this is why we weren't afraid of AI. It just did this, nothing. Sorry, just gotta stake my position for the AI wars. I will say seeing these Lego-esque punching animations on Peter is something else. That door is gone. So is your life. I don't think that Narnia is as good as Lego Star Wars, the video game, and it seems like critics didn't either. Lego has that hub world that you could explore, then fill with tons of collectibles you could actually see, while Narnia has a more standard stage select. There are collectibles, but they don't seem to amount to much outside of new combos for the cast. I guess since they focused on just 4 playable characters, they could expand their individual movesets, which I thought was cool. You could see Traveler's Tale would apply that to their later games. And sure enough, the Narnia sequel, Prince Caspian, Dolphin, also had a video game clearly built off those Lego engines with nearly identical gameplay. Think I prefer the first game's run cycles though. He's zooming. But hey, speaking Star Wars Demolition. We've talked about it a few times briefly, but when you think of clones, specifically Twisted Metal or Vigilante 8 clones, Star Wars Demolition is peak that. Which makes sense considering it was developed by the creators of Vigilante 8. This game is a freaking mess. Look at wobbly little Boba Fett. Vehicle combat is probably a bad genre of video games, but I love them. All right, let's jump ahead to today. Typically, the games we've covered are from franchises that are older because they're more recognizable. However, that hasn't stopped newer ideas from getting hit with the imitation stick. Like last time with Cuphead. Sometimes a good idea is just a good idea, no matter how egregious the clones get. For instance, Vampire Survivors. AKA the Bullet Heaven auto shooter survivor likes. I have no idea what we're calling these yet, but Bullet Heaven sounds good enough to me. I freaking love Vampire Survivors. I've played an irresponsible amount of this across every platform and tons of co-op with different people. It boggles the mind that this is $5 full price, and that's after the price increase. Technically inspired by a game called Magic Survival, Vampire Survivors took the concept, slapped on more random level up roguelike stuff, went full bullet hell, and a fresh coat of not Castlevania, which is funny considering it just got announced for a Castlevania collab. Well, the word survivors is now being used as a genre all over the place, and what we're seeing is more and more clones, rip-offs, and a surprising amount of H games inspired by it. Anyways, I've played a decent amount of survivor likes. There's not much to say about them considering they're pure dopamine extracts, so here's a few of them. Rogue Genesia, Brotato, Deep Rock Galactic Survivor, yeah, like a spin-off of Deep Rock Galactic. Halls of Torment, if you want to do this thing with a Diablo 1 aesthetic, goes pretty hard too. Death Must Die, Soulstone Survivors, Pesticide not required, Beautiful Mystic Survivors, and the sexy variant. Oh yeah, there's a Survivors clone for that Nicolas Cage Renfield movie that came out last year. It's kind of weird. 20 Minutes Till Dawn, a game literally called Time Wasters, and don't blink, Pokemon clone Temtem's getting its own VS clone. These things are pretty easy to make, I suppose, and I can't help but play all of them. Don't sleep on Whisker Squadron Survivor. It's like Vampire Survivors had a child with Star Fox, and it kind of goes hard. But speaking of Pokemon, we gotta talk about Palworld, the latest target by Nintendo's legal machine, which is really weird to me because I didn't think Nintendo owned the rights to Ark. Ha ha. Pocket Pair's Palworld is what happens when you let a Roblox game designer team up with a 5-year-old to create a concept that will inevitably sell millions. Survival games have been steadily popular for a decade now, especially multiplayer ones. Now, why don't you toss in a breadth of what I can only call collectible monsters of the pocket and ball variety. Put them to work in the mines and give them guns to do the whole survival thing. It is insane that Palworld mustered up well over 15 million sales worldwide. People were crying in the streets over this, proclaiming Pokemon ripoff, and Nintendo didn't do nothing. Not about the designs and premise anyways. Patent lawsuit it is. Very cool. I mean, imagine if Capcom went after all the Monster Hunter clones out there, cause like these are pretty obvious too. I literally thought Wild Hearts was a new entry in Monster Hunter for a solid minute into that debut trailer due to its similarities, and you know what? I actually really enjoyed playing it as well. Omega Force teamed up with Electronic Arts for this, a bizarre combination, and gave us a pretty cool hunting title with a big twist of the Karakuri, these little machines that you can input combos of for special tools. I played this for a solid 50 hours before I hit that Monster Hunter wall of grinding sickness, but Wild Hearts is simply one of many. The Tokiden series goes with Japanese folklore where you can fight Oni, the God Eater series takes place in the distant apocalyptic future where you fight Aragami. Heck, this one was so popular, it's got its own anime, toy line, and several sequels. Freedom Wars, Dauntless, Soul Sacrifice, even Square Enix hopped on the lobby-based monster hunting genre that was dominating Japanese handhelds with Final Fantasy Explorers. These games know what they are, and they're mostly pretty good too. So how's about a weirder, more modern, and very specific concept that got a clone recently? Look, all I'm saying is if you're gonna make a Splatoon clone, it's kinda hard to hide it. So as you can probably guess, I sat down and tried Foamstars out and kinda liked it. Square Enix wants you to stop comparing Foamstars to Splatoon. Well, too bad, John Squeenix. It's really hard when your movement mechanics are nearly identical, although it's not bad. Out of the gate, yeah, Square was found using generative AI with some asset creation. They're claiming it was only used for some of the in-game icons, specifically album covers for the soundtrack. There could potentially be more, and I'm not about it, they shouldn't do this again, but I want to talk about the game itself. It's one part hero shooter, another part Splatoon, slapped together with an emphasis on KOs or lane control, depending on the game mode. Thankfully, they didn't go full on Splatoon with the map percentages, but the inspiration is clearly there. What I don't get saying talked about are the aesthetics. Foamstars feels like a freaking fever dream. I think the trailer sold it short. Each of the stages, the characters, the music, it feels like I'm dipping my toes back into that incredibly video gamey Sega vibe that you don't see much of these days. It's so bright, colorful, goofy, and the character designs aren't too bad either. I like that the foam you can shoot can compile on itself, so when you're surfing through it, you have a landscape created by the battlefield. It reminds me a bit of Worms or Ace of Spades, where you're in a familiar map, but it can change depending on you and the enemy team's loadouts. And some of these weapons are wild. You got foam pistols, foam shotguns, and even foam rocket launchers. I like Mel T because she can do a literal foam airstrike. Foamstars knows it's dumb, and I appreciate that. I played this with a few friends for footage, thinking we'd get like 3 to 4 matches in, but we ended up playing for 3 hours just for this video, and even dabbling a bit in the co-op PvE mode, which was a little underwhelming, but I can see the potential. Foamstars is foaming with potential, and it's a shame that the controversies and blatant cloneness prevented it from being more. It's also a little light on content. I totally forgot about this game until I got an email saying that the 8th season was about to begin with it going free to play, which just makes me think this entire year has been a time warp, but also how I can see this game going away sooner rather than later. There's a couple of cool small details too. Characters dance to the beat in the lobby screen. The multiplayer lounges let you pile up foam to test weapons and dick around with the physics, and you can customize how it all looks. I haven't followed the progression of this over the last year, but in its current new free-to-play state, I did not have a bad time. It's just also hard not to look at it with hesitation due to the generative AI usage and claims. Although it's probably difficult for a machine to come up with this. The world is foamed up. Where my foamers at? Honestly, I don't think a rare PlayStation exclusive Foamstars is gonna last much longer due to the way that these things pan out. So if you wanna check it out before it inevitably goes the way of Marvel's Avengers, I did have a good time. I am tired of saying the word foam though. I can only say the phrase defoam me in a voice chat before I don't wanna do that anymore. But for now, we got one more game to talk about. Everybody knows Sonic, and I mean everybody, and I've been wanting to tackle the sequel to one of its more popular clones for a good while now. It took a long time to get fully developed, but Freedom Planet 2 sure came out swinging. It's hard to look at Freedom Planet or its sequel and not immediately think Sonic the Hedgehog, and I don't think it wants you to feel any other way. The original was an indie title by a developer called Galaxy Trail that achieved all sorts of prestige on its own, and the sequel seems to replicate that success. If you haven't played Freedom Planet, it's absolutely worth a shot. The cast is mostly likable, and while some of the dialogue isn't my thing, it's got a great feel to it. The sequel, Freedom Planet 2, let's be real, gameplay-wise, it's better in every way. It's also got some drop-dead gorgeous sprite art. Like, everything is so detailed, which might be a bit of a detriment to me specifically, but more on that in a minute. This time around, you get to pick between one of 4 characters. We've got Lilac the Dragon, Carol the Wildcat, Milia the Hound, and new to the bunch is Nira the Frost Knight. All 4 of them follow your general Sonic-like movement and run speeds, but have different movesets to set them apart. Lilac has a dragon charge to zoom forward, Carol uses a spinny top to jump, and a motorcycle. Like, okay, yeah, motorcycle platforming. Milia uses a magic orb gun shield thing, and Nira has a magic wand that she could do ice stuff with. And just shoot things. The experience of playing as the 4 of them is different enough to stand out on its own in each of these levels, and frankly, this feels like a decent direction to move Sonic into, not whatever Superstars was. The scripting and dialogue seem tighter, overall improved, although not necessarily my shtick. It's got a nice lighthearted feel to it while occasionally dipping into serious moments, but keeps it brisk. The presentation, story, aesthetic, all Gucci. Really? I'm just drawn in by the gameplay, and playing this feels like I'm stumbling upon a PlayStation 1, Saturn, or Dreamcast 2D platformer that I missed back in the day, like an import. Absolutely no complaints on that end. Well, except the fact that there might be a little bit too much going on. The environments and character sprites are so detailed that on my TV and computer monitor, things get a little blurry when I'm moving fast, especially in the first few stages. Is this a sign of me getting older and melting? Potentially, but also after a few hours, I got used to it before I could really play with no issues. But hey, the kiddos should have no problem. If you want to play a fantastic Sonic clone, more so inspired adventure romp reminiscent of the olden days, there's not much better than Freedom Planet 1 and 2. No jokes here, but it gets bonus points for wrestling references.
Then come on down to the Battlesphere for Mayhem Monday!
I want to be the one that does the yelling here.
So there you have it, more clones that you may or may not have heard of and or played. A lot of and or. For real, who out there's actually played Foamstars? Everyone's out too busy with their 9-to-5s to do their Foamstar dailies. If you liked today's video, let me know. You can also help the channel out by visiting today's sponsor, Rocket Money, or supporting us directly via Patreon. With that, your money goes directly back into the videos and you'll gain access to the community Discord. Buy a t-shirt over at the Pixel Empire or just leave a comment. Hopefully a nice one. I'm always looking for more clones. Discovery is fun. Anywho, we're gonna keep this shorter because we've done this hundreds of times. I've been Austin, and I'll catch y'all on the other side. Thank you so much for watching. Special Patreon shout out to Alfred Correa, Charles Rosner, Pacha Bear, Rare Find It, Benna Oswald, Dylan Snyder, Idlevice Cheeks, Vox, Hey Quiggles, Randall Bentley, Platinum Rose, Blake Thomas, Blackfoot Ferret, Pierre, Aaron Kwolek, Ryan Talbert, Kevin Zanowski, Chris Shelton, Jay Roos, Jacoby Fitzpatrick, Fragile Traveler, and DX Buster. Thank you all so much for your generous support. Yo, we're doing it. I have I don't know if it's a good idea, but it's something I'm thinking about. Like maybe just doing Funko Fusion 100%. I'm gonna leave that for the people who stay at the very end of the videos to give me a yes or no on. Do you wanna see that? I keep looking at that game with a morbid curiosity. Anyway, I'm gonna go for now. Catch you guys later. Bye bye.